In a Los Angeles courtroom where an arrogant judge's cold laughter once sealed an innocent man's fate, a fearless attorney unearths a hidden web of corruption, igniting a dramatic reversal that will shock you and redefine the fight for justice. The heavy oak doors of the Los Angeles County Courthouse swung open with a resonant thud that echoed off the marble floors, as if heralding an impending storm. Inside, the courtroom exuded a chilling atmosphere, a blend of opulent architecture and an almost tangible aura of foreboding. The space was alive with silent histories and secrets, its walls steeped in decades of unspoken injustice and whispered recollections of lives upended. Every carved detail in the massive wooden panels and every cold marble column bore witness to a legacy that few dared to challenge, a legacy built on a foundation of power, prejudice, and relentless authority. At the center of this imposing chamber sat Judge Cassandra Blackwood, a figure whose very presence radiated a commanding arrogance honed over 24 long years on the bench. Her reputation was etched into the very fabric of this courthouse. She was known to silence attorneys with a mere glance, to dismiss heartfelt pleas with a single, condescending laugh. With her slender reading glasses perched imperiously on her nose, and her piercing, calculating eyes fixed steadily ahead, Judge Blackwood embodied an unyielding authority that left no room for dissent. Her voice, always measured and low, carried an undercurrent of ruthless efficiency, a tone that made every word she uttered feel like an irrevocable decree, crushing any hope of resistance before it could even begin. Today, however, the stage was set for a performance unlike any other. The case before her was that of Darius Washington, a black man whose quiet dignity and resilient spirit stood in stark contrast to the oppressive system that sought to confine him. Darius sat at the defendant's table with a composed expression, though his eyes revealed a lifetime of silent suffering and an enduring hope that refused to be extinguished. Every wrinkle and scar on his face told a story of hardship and determination, a testament to the trials he had endured under a system designed to marginalize those who did not fit its narrow mold of acceptable justice. As the proceedings began, Judge Blackwood's disdainful gaze swept over the courtroom like a cold wind. With an imperious tilt of her head, she addressed the assembly in her characteristically calm yet intimidating tone. "Mr. Robinson, I trust you have prepared your case to the fullest. I expect no theatrics today." Her words dripped with subtle condescension, each syllable serving as a reminder that in her courtroom, any challenge was not merely discouraged, it was doomed to be crushed. Jamal Robinson, the defense attorney representing Darius, advanced slowly towards the defense table. Known for his unshakable composure and a career built on fighting for the underdog, Jamal's presence today was charged with quiet determination. His polished shoes clicked resolutely against the marble floor, a measured cadence that spoke of years spent in hostile courtrooms where every case felt like a battle against an entrenched system of bias. As he took his seat, Jamal's eyes briefly met those of Judge Blackwood. For an instant, he saw not the cold, unyielding authority of a judge, but a hint of smug satisfaction, a silent declaration that she already considered him beneath her notice. It was a look that conveyed both personal disdain and the cruel certainty of a system that had predetermined his fate. The courtroom was soon filled with a mixture of hushed whispers and barely contained tension. Observers exchanged glances, many aware of the unspoken narrative that had long defined Judge Blackwood's courtroom. Attorneys who had once trembled at her pronouncements now silently braced themselves for what would undoubtedly be another display of her notorious, unchecked power. Every element of the scene, the stern faces, the meticulous attention to detail in the courtroom's design, the oppressive silence punctuated only by the measured cadence of the judge's voice, served as a stark reminder of the high stakes involved. This was not merely a legal proceeding, it was a microcosm of a broader struggle against systemic injustice, a struggle where every ruling, every gesture carried the weight of lives and futures. Darius Washington, sitting quietly in the defendant's box, was a picture of stoic resilience. Despite the oppressive aura of the courtroom and the palpable tension that seemed to crush every hopeful thought, he maintained a quiet dignity. His eyes, though marked by years of injustice, held a spark, a deep, unyielding belief that his story was not yet finished. Every fiber of his being radiated an inner strength that, despite the world's efforts to silence him, refused to be extinguished. It was as if, in the face of overwhelming adversity, Darius had become a living testament to the enduring power of hope. Outside the ornate courtroom, Los Angeles buzzed with the rhythm of the city, a vibrant contrast to the suffocating atmosphere within. The skyline, a mix of modern glass towers and historic structures, stood as a testament to progress and struggle alike. Yet inside these hallowed walls, the passage of time seemed to slow, as if the courthouse itself were a sanctuary of secrets, guarding the dark truths of years past. Every step taken by the attorneys, every murmur shared between the jurors, carried the weight of history, a history in which power had been abused and lives had been shattered by a system that valued authority over humanity. As the trial commenced, Judge Blackwood launched into her customary routine. Her tone was smooth and unyielding, each word delivered with an air of absolute certainty that brooked no argument. She meticulously reviewed the case files, her eyes flitting over each document as though they were mere trifles unworthy of deeper scrutiny. With every passing moment, the room seemed to grow colder, as if the very essence of compassion were being drained away, replaced by an insidious rigidity. The judge's dismissive attitude was palpable, and even the most seasoned attorneys in the room felt a chill as they realized that no argument, no matter how well founded, could challenge the formidable force of her authority. Jamal Robinson listened intently as Judge Blackwood's remarks reverberated through the courtroom. Every time she laughed softly at a well-meaning comment or dismissed an objection with a flick of her hand, a spark of defiance flickered in his eyes. He knew that beneath the veneer of judicial decorum lay a deeply entrenched bias, a bias that had cost many more lives than could ever be measured in legal briefs and transcripts. For Jamal, this trial was not just another case to be won. It was an opportunity to expose the systemic injustice that had long plagued the corridors of power. Each dismissive comment and every condescending remark was a challenge, a silent dare to prove that truth and justice could not be so easily silenced. In the midst of this high-stakes performance, a subtle undercurrent of tension began to build. The atmosphere was charged with the unspoken promise that something significant was about to unfold. The courthouse, once a bastion of order and routine, now pulsed with a sense of imminent change. Every heart in the room beat in quiet anticipation. Every mind lingered on the possibility that the rigid structures of power might finally be questioned. It was a moment suspended in time, filled with the promise of upheaval, a moment where the carefully constructed facade of authority was destined to crumble. Darius Washington's silent gaze from the defendant's box captured the essence of this turning point. His eyes, deep and reflective, seemed to speak volumes of the inner battles fought in silence, of the countless nights spent in a holding cell where hope was a fragile ember waiting to ignite into a flame of change. Despite the crushing weight of injustice, there was an unmistakable glimmer of resilience in his expression, a defiant assurance that his truth would eventually rise above the bias that had once sought to bury it. As the opening minutes of the trial stretched on, every detail within the courtroom seemed designed to reinforce a single narrative: that the system, as embodied by Judge Blackwood, was unyielding, unchallengeable, and ultimately indifferent to the plight of those it judged. Yet within that same oppressive environment, a quiet rebellion was stirring. Jamal Robinson, with every careful objection and every meticulously presented piece of evidence, was not merely defending his client. He was laying the groundwork for a larger battle against the entrenched injustice that had haunted this courtroom for too long. The stage was set for an epic confrontation, a clash between the rigid, archaic mechanisms of power and the unquenchable spirit of those who dared to challenge it. The silence in the room was a canvas upon which the drama of human resilience and the pursuit of truth was about to be painted. In that moment, as the judge's dispassionate eyes scanned the room and the weight of countless lives seemed to hang in the balance, the seeds of change were quietly sown. Every whispered conversation in the gallery, every exchanged glance among the jurors, and every measured breath from the defense team contributed to an atmosphere charged with an almost tangible intensity. It was a moment that demanded to be remembered, a moment where the very foundations of the justice system were called into question, where the time-worn legacy of bias was poised on the brink of transformation. And as the proceedings unfolded, the promise of redemption for the oppressed, the vindication of the silenced, and the possibility of a new dawn of justice began to shimmer faintly on the horizon. In the heart of the Los Angeles County Courthouse, where the past and present converged in a silent testament to both triumph and tragedy, the journey for truth had just begun. The arrogant facade of Judge Blackwood, once so unassailable, now stood as a challenge that Jamal Robinson and his team were determined to meet head-on. Darius Washington, with his quiet strength and unspoken determination, embodied the hope that justice, however delayed, could still prevail. And in that sacred space, where every element of architecture and every echo of history converged to create an atmosphere heavy with expectation, the stage was set for a battle that would reverberate far beyond the confines of this courtroom. As the trial's opening moments faded into the charged hum of anticipation, it was clear that this was more than a legal proceeding. It was a clarion call for change, a rallying cry for those who believed that every human life deserved dignity and fairness. The seeds of revolution had been planted in the very heart of injustice, and though the road ahead was fraught with challenges, the promise of a new dawn, a dawn where truth and justice could finally prevail, burned bright. The journey to dismantle the entrenched systems of prejudice had begun in this hallowed courtroom, and every heartbeat in that moment echoed with the promise that no authority, however mighty, was beyond reproach. The narrative was clear. The struggle for justice was not only about a single case, nor was it confined to the faded pages of history. It was a living, breathing battle, one that demanded courage, resilience, and the unyielding belief that every voice mattered. In that charged atmosphere, where the old order was being questioned and the light of hope began to penetrate the darkness, the promise of transformation glimmered on the horizon. The tale of Darius Washington and the resolute defense mounted by Jamal Robinson was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a spirit that, when united against injustice, could shatter even the most formidable barriers. And as the echoes of that promise reverberated through the storied halls of the courthouse, it was clear that this was the beginning of an epic journey, a journey that would redefine the very nature of justice and ignite a new era of accountability, fairness, and redemption. In the days following the opening of the trial, the corridors of the Los Angeles County Courthouse seemed to hum with an undercurrent of disquiet, a murmur of truths long suppressed, and a quiet determination to expose a system built on selective injustice. Behind the imposing facade of Judge Cassandra Blackwood's courtroom, where every detail had been meticulously designed to project an image of absolute authority, cracks began to appear in the carefully constructed narrative of impartiality. The rigid, almost clinical precision with which Judge Blackwood had ruled for 24 years was now under scrutiny. As defense attorney Jamal Robinson led a methodical inquiry into a legacy of bias and deliberate manipulation. Jamal's strategy was as precise as it was resolute. With unwavering calm, he presented a series of meticulously gathered documents and statistical analyses that revealed an unsettling pattern. Every objection raised by previous attorneys, every piece of evidence that had mysteriously vanished from the record, and every disproportionate sentence imposed on black defendants in similar cases formed an irrefutable mosaic of systemic bias. It was not enough to simply claim injustice. Jamal needed to dismantle the facade of order that Judge Blackwood had maintained with such clinical detachment. Every page of his dossier, every redacted email, and every comparison of case files from the past 2 decades was assembled with a singular purpose: to expose the inherent corruption that had plagued this courtroom. In a quiet conference room at a local legal aid center in downtown Los Angeles, Jamal sat with his trusted team, poring over reams of case files and internal memos. His voice was low, yet every word carried the weight of years spent in silent observation of a system that consistently denied fair treatment. "These aren't random errors," he insisted, his eyes fixed on a series of printed records. "They are patterns, a deliberate, systematic manipulation that ensures a predetermined outcome every single time." His colleagues, including his diligent assistant Marisol and seasoned investigator Aaron Miller, nodded solemnly as they reviewed documents that detailed how witness testimonies were abruptly cut short, how crucial evidence was inexplicably omitted, and how digital files were subtly altered. In those long, tireless hours, the team uncovered redacted communications between clerks and internal emails that hinted at a coordinated effort to bury evidence that might undermine the prosecution's narrative. One of the most damning pieces of evidence emerged from the work of Lydia Chen, a digital forensic expert whose reputation for meticulous scrutiny had already earned her a quiet following among reform-minded attorneys. Lydia had analyzed several hours of surveillance footage used in previous trials overseen by Judge Blackwood, and her findings were both shocking and undeniable, and with careful precision, she demonstrated how the metadata of these recordings contained anomalies, altered timestamps, pixelated shadows, and inexplicable gaps that suggested deliberate tampering. Her report detailed how these discrepancies were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader strategy to manipulate digital evidence in favor of the prosecution. The evidence, presented in clear, comprehensible charts and side-by-side comparisons, left little room for doubt. The recordings had been subtly, yet deliberately, altered to reinforce a narrative that ensured harsher sentences for black defendants. Jamal's presentation of Lydia's findings was met with a heavy silence in the courtroom. The jurors, whose earlier stoicism had been a shield against the overt displays of bias, now exchanged looks of concern. Their expressions shifted subtly as the layers of the case unfolded, revealing that the system in this very courtroom was not as impartial as it was reputed to be. Every slide that Lydia projected, every minute detail of the manipulated footage, resonated deeply with those present. It was as if the walls of the courthouse themselves were beginning to crumble under the weight of the uncovered truth. But the investigation was not confined solely to digital evidence. Jamal also brought forward testimony from former court employees who had long grown disillusioned with the practices in Judge Blackwood's chambers. One retired clerk, now in his 70s, and with a voice trembling from years of suppressed frustration, recounted how he had witnessed files being routinely altered and crucial pieces of exculpatory evidence being quietly excised from official records. His testimony was raw and unpolished, a stark contrast to the polished veneer of the courtroom, but it was exactly what was needed to validate the claims of systematic bias. The clerk's narrative painted a vivid picture of a judicial process that was less about fair adjudication and more about perpetuating a cycle of injustice for those who were already vulnerable. As Jamal's evidence continued to mount, the narrative of bias and corruption began to spread beyond the confines of the courthouse. In nearby coffee shops and bustling legal offices, attorneys who had once feared stepping into Judge Blackwood's courtroom now found their skepticism validated. They recalled whispered conversations during bar association meetings, where her methods were discussed in hushed tones, an unspoken acknowledgement of a system that consistently tilted the scales against black defendants. This growing chorus of dissent and shared experience added a communal weight to Jamal's case. The story was no longer just about Darius Washington's trial. It was about decades of a legacy that had systematically undermined justice. Outside the courthouse, the city of Los Angeles vibrated with a duality of hope and despair. While the bustling streets and vibrant murals celebrated progress and diversity, the shadow of systemic injustice still loomed large. Community activists, galvanized by the revelations emerging from the trial, organized impromptu meetings and vigils to discuss the implications of the uncovered bias. At one such gathering in a community center near downtown, a group of determined citizens shared their own experiences of injustice, stories that echoed the documented patterns in Judge Blackwood's courtroom. These public forums, though informal, lent a powerful human dimension to the cold, hard data presented by Jamal and his team. As the trial progressed, every new piece of evidence further deepened the revelation of systemic injustice. Jamal's presentation evolved from a dry recitation of facts into an impassioned plea for accountability. His voice, steady and resolute, carried the burden of every life affected by the hidden biases of the system. He spoke not only of statistical anomalies and tampered evidence, but also of the human cost, the shattered dreams of defendants like Darius Washington, the broken families left in the wake of unjust rulings, and the erosion of public trust in a system meant to serve and protect. The courtroom became a microcosm of the larger societal struggle, a place where the battle for truth was being waged with both logic and emotion. Every piece of evidence that was unveiled served as a clarion call for reform, challenging the established order and urging everyone present to confront the uncomfortable reality of a system skewed by prejudice. The atmosphere grew more charged with each passing minute, and even the most skeptical members of the jury could no longer ignore the stark inconsistencies that had been laid bare. Throughout this process, Jamal Robinson maintained a measured demeanor, though inside he was fueled by a fierce determination. He understood that his efforts in exposing these biases were not merely to secure a win for his client, they were part of a larger crusade to dismantle an unjust system. Every fact he presented, every document he referenced, was a step toward revealing the deep-seated corruption that had long been hidden behind the polished veneer of judicial authority. In parallel, the media began to take notice. Local newspapers and news channels, once reticent to challenge the status quo, started to report on the anomalies in Judge Blackwood's past rulings. Investigative journalists dug deeper, uncovering additional layers of bias and connecting dots that many had long suspected but never dared to articulate publicly. Social media buzzed with hashtags and discussions as community members, legal experts, and even former insiders weighed in on the revelations. The growing public scrutiny added further pressure on the courthouse, and it became increasingly evident that the time for reform was not in the distant future. It was happening now. The evidence of bias, meticulously compiled by Jamal and his team, began to resonate with those who had long been marginalized by the judicial system. Each new testimony, every statistic, and every detail of tampering created a tapestry of injustice that was as damning as it was inspiring. The courtroom, once a stage for the unchallenged authority of Judge Blackwood, was now evolving into a platform for voices that had been suppressed for too long. The collective realization was clear. The system had been rigged to favor the powerful, and it was high time that the scales of justice were recalibrated. For Darius Washington, the revelations in the courtroom stirred a silent but potent hope. His eyes, once dulled by years of oppression, now glimmered with the promise of eventual vindication. The evidence presented was not just about dismantling a biased process, it was about affirming his humanity and restoring his dignity. His quiet strength in the face of overwhelming odds became a symbol of resistance, an unspoken message that no matter how deeply entrenched the corruption, truth, and perseverance would ultimately prevail. As Jamal Robinson wrapped up his segment of the trial, the atmosphere was electric, a mix of solemn determination and a newfound awareness that change was not only possible but imminent. The meticulously gathered documents, the expert analysis by Lydia Chin, and the heartfelt testimonies of former insiders had all converged to reveal a dark tapestry of bias and corruption. The courtroom, with its imposing architecture and storied history, now served as a crucible for a much larger battle, a battle for accountability, fairness, and the unyielding right of every individual to be heard. In that moment, as the defense concluded its presentation, a profound shift had taken root. The unyielding facade of impartiality that had defined Judge Blackwood's reign was now being dismantled, piece by piece, by the undeniable power of truth. The courtroom was no longer just a venue for legal proceedings. It had become a battleground where the hidden biases of the past were exposed and the promise of a reformed future began to take shape. Every heart in the room beat in unison with the hope that the long suppressed voice of justice would finally rise, and every mind was awakened to the possibility that a system marred by prejudice could indeed be transformed. As the proceedings of this segment drew to a close, the evidence of systemic bias and deliberate manipulation had not only unsettled the established order but had also ignited a spark that promised to illuminate the path toward lasting reform. The meticulous work of Jamal Robinson and his team had set in motion a process of reckoning, one that would ultimately challenge the entrenched power structures and pave the way for a judicial system founded on fairness, transparency, and respect for every human life. This unrelenting pursuit of truth, born out of a deep-seated need to rectify decades of injustice, was more than a legal strategy. It was a moral imperative, a call to arms for those who believe that the scales of justice must always be balanced. And as the courtroom slowly emptied, leaving behind an air heavy with contemplation and the promise of change, it was clear that the journey toward true justice had taken an irrevocable turn. The battle against systemic bias was far from over, but the first major step had been taken, a step that resonated with every individual who had ever felt voiceless in the face of overwhelming injustice. In the echoing silence that followed Jamal's final remarks, the unyielding power of the uncovered truth lingered, a truth that, despite the darkness of decades past, now shone with the promise of a brighter, more equitable future. The stage was set, the evidence was irrefutable, and the fight for justice had taken on a new, resounding clarity. The collective spirit of the community, the determination of dedicated legal professionals, and the enduring resilience of those who had suffered under a biased system all converged in this moment of reckoning, a moment that would forever alter the course of justice in Los Angeles and beyond. In the days following the explosive opening of the trial, a quiet but potent revolution began to take shape behind the imposing walls of the Los Angeles County Courthouse. As the weight of unchallenged authority started to wane, Jamal Robinson and his steadfast team embarked on a painstaking journey to uncover the hidden truths that had long been buried beneath layers of bureaucratic indifference. Every document they retrieved, every redacted memo they scrutinized, and every whispered account from former court clerks added another piece to a puzzle that exposed a legacy of systematic bias. Late one evening in a modest conference room within a downtown legal aid center, Jamal sat with his assistant Marisol and the seasoned investigator Aaron Miller. The soft hum of fluorescent lights and the rustle of paper provided the only background to their intense discussion. They pored over stacks of case files and internal emails, tracing discrepancies that stretched back over decades. Aaron's voice was barely above a whisper as he revealed his latest finding. These internal communications indicate that evidence favorable to the defense was consistently sidelined. It wasn't random, it was orchestrated. Marisol's eyes widened with the realization that every anomaly in the records was part of a deliberate pattern designed to deny justice. The investigation revealed that in several previous cases, crucial pieces of evidence had vanished without explanation. Jamal meticulously compiled data from similar trials, constructing comparative charts that showed a disturbing trend. Cases involving black defendants, like Darius Washington, ended with significantly harsher outcomes than those with white defendants. The statistical evidence was irrefutable, a systematic manipulation of outcomes that had become the unspoken norm in Judge Cassandra Blackwood's courtroom. Each graph and timeline Jamal assembled painted a stark picture of a system skewed by bias and built on a foundation of prejudice. In parallel with these painstaking efforts, digital forensic specialist Lydia Chen was hard at work. In her small lab surrounded by multiple screens displaying streams of video data, Lydia analyzed surveillance footage that had been previously used to condemn defendants in Judge Blackwood's courtroom. With a precision that bordered on obsession, she uncovered subtle alterations, metadata anomalies, abrupt changes in lighting, and pixelation irregularities in the shadows that no natural recording could produce. Lydia's report, complete with side-by-side comparisons of the original and altered footage, demonstrated clearly that someone had tampered with the digital evidence to create a false narrative. Her findings struck a chord not only with Jamal and his team, but also with members of the jury, whose expressions gradually shifted from neutrality to quiet concern as the implications of her work became apparent. During a break between court sessions, whispers began to circulate among the legal professionals present. Veteran attorneys recalled years of hushed conversations about Judge Blackwood's notorious rulings and the way her courtroom seemed to function as a closed system, immune to external scrutiny. In hushed tones over coffee in the courthouse lobby, a group of young lawyers confessed that they had long suspected something was amiss, though they had never dared speak out. Their murmurs of disbelief and frustration underscored the magnitude of the corruption that had been allowed to thrive for so long. This collective realization added a human dimension to the cold, hard statistics Jamal had so carefully compiled, transforming abstract data into a narrative of lives upended by a rigged system. As the trial resumed, Jamal Robinson returned to the stand with a renewed sense of purpose. His tone was measured, yet infused with an undercurrent of passion that could not be ignored. He began by systematically presenting the evidence that his team had painstakingly gathered. He spoke of the redacted emails exchanged between court clerks, emails that hinted at a coordinated effort to expunge or alter evidence that could have exonerated defendants in previous cases. He described how, in numerous instances, key witness statements had been truncated abruptly, as if a hidden directive had intervened to silence their full accounts. Each detail was delivered with a calm intensity that contrasted sharply with the palpable tension in the courtroom. Jamal's presentation took the form of a narrative, a story that wove together numbers, expert testimony, and the lived experiences of those who had suffered under the weight of systemic bias. He spoke of a pattern. Over the years, every objection that should have been heard was dismissed with casual arrogance, and every piece of evidence that could challenge the status quo was quietly sidelined. The methodical dissection of past cases revealed a recurring theme. The manipulation of digital evidence was not an aberration, but a standard operating procedure in Judge Blackwood's courtroom. Jamal's voice grew stronger as he recounted the testimony of a former clerk, whose anonymous account detailed how he had witnessed crucial files being altered at the last minute. The clerk's words, raw and unfiltered, resonated in the charged silence that now blanketed the courtroom, a stark contrast to the polished rhetoric typically expected in legal proceedings. In that moment, the true cost of systemic injustice became all too clear. Every piece of evidence, every meticulously recorded statistic, was a reminder of the countless lives that had been derailed by a system that valued expedience over fairness. Jamal's narrative was not merely about exposing technical anomalies, it was about uncovering a moral failure that had persisted for decades. The statistics he presented were interwoven with stories of personal loss, of families torn apart by unchallenged rulings, and of a community left to bear the scars of a deeply flawed process. Outside the formal proceedings, the impact of these revelations began to seep into the broader public consciousness. In the busy streets of Los Angeles, local news outlets picked up on the mounting evidence, and social media erupted with discussions about the hidden corruption in Judge Blackwood's courtroom. Hashtags and posts detailed the new findings, sparking debates among citizens who had long suspected that the justice system was rigged against them. Community meetings were organized, where affected individuals shared their experiences and called for reform. The unfolding narrative of bias and manipulation was no longer confined to legal circles. It had become a rallying cry for systemic change, resonating with a generation determined to hold power accountable. Jamal's evidence not only revealed technical manipulations, but also illuminated a broader pattern of neglect and deliberate prejudice. He presented detailed comparisons of case outcomes that showed a consistent disparity. Black defendants were systematically given harsher sentences, a fact that could no longer be dismissed as mere coincidence. This statistical portrait of injustice was reinforced by expert testimonies and the compelling narrative of a former court clerk who had risked everything to reveal the truth. The courtroom, once a bastion of cold, indifferent authority, now served as a stage for a quiet revolution, a revolution driven by the unyielding demand for accountability and the belief that every human life deserved to be treated with dignity. As Jamal continued, his voice carried a quiet urgency, a plea for those present to see beyond the veneer of routine and to confront the very real consequences of a corrupted system. His words painted a vivid picture of a justice system that had long been compromised by hidden biases, a system that had silenced voices and destroyed lives, all under the guise of impartiality. The meticulous presentation of evidence was interlaced with moments of raw emotion as Jamal recalled the personal toll that such systemic injustice had taken on individuals like Darius Washington. His narrative was both analytical and profoundly human, striking a chord with everyone in the room who had ever questioned the true nature of fairness. The cumulative effect of Jamal's presentation was transformative. The once unchallenged authority of Judge Blackwood, which had long been the unspoken rule in this courtroom, was now being deconstructed piece by piece. The revelation of tampered digital evidence, the undeniable statistical trends, and the courageous accounts of former insiders had created an atmosphere of irreversible change. The collective mood in the courtroom shifted as jurors and spectators alike absorbed the truth, an unyielding truth that spoke to the very heart of systemic injustice. Darius Washington, who had remained silent throughout much of the proceedings, now looked as if a spark had been lit within him. Though his face bore the marks of a long struggle against prejudice, his eyes shone with the quiet hope of a man who realized that the tide of injustice was turning. The evidence presented by Jamal was not just a technical rebuttal, it was a clarion call to the community that the dark legacy of bias was being exposed and that every suppressed truth would eventually come to light. In that charged moment, as the final pieces of evidence were laid bare, the courtroom became a crucible of transformation. The hidden truths that had been carefully concealed for so long were now emerging into the light, challenging the established order and promising a future where the scales of justice could finally be balanced. The meticulous work of Jamal Robinson and his dedicated team had not only unearthed a damning record of manipulation, but had also ignited a collective determination to confront and rectify the systemic failures that had marred countless lives. The turning tide in the courtroom was more than just an accumulation of evidence. It was the awakening of a collective conscience. Every piece of data, every testimonial, every quietly powerful observation had converged to form a narrative that could no longer be ignored. The unyielding pursuit of truth had transformed the proceedings into a battle for the soul of justice itself, a battle in which the integrity of the legal system was at stake and where every revelation was a step toward redemption. As the courtroom slowly absorbed the full magnitude of the uncovered truths, there was a renewed sense of urgency and possibility. The layers of systemic bias had been peeled back, and the evidence of deliberate manipulation was undeniable. In that moment, the battle was no longer solely about defending a single man. It had become a testament to the power of persistence and the belief that the truth, when relentlessly pursued, would inevitably dismantle even the most entrenched systems of injustice. By the end of this turning tide, the once impregnable facade of Judge Blackwood's courtroom was now deeply tarnished by the revelation of its inner workings. A system that had long prioritized power over fairness was now exposed for what it truly was. The evidence of bias and manipulation had galvanized not only those within the legal profession, but also a broader community that had long suffered in silence. The narrative of injustice had been rewritten, and with it, a new chapter was emerging, one that promised a future where every individual, regardless of background, would finally be afforded the justice they deserved. In the echoing silence that followed Jamal's impassioned presentation, the courtroom stood as a monument to the undeniable truth that had been uncovered. The turning tide had not only revealed the hidden depths of bias, but had also sparked a collective awakening, a realization that the fight for justice was far from over, but that every piece of uncovered truth was a beacon guiding the way toward a more equitable future. The meticulous, unyielding work of exposing these hidden truths had set in motion a transformation that would reverberate far beyond these walls, promising that the scales of justice, though long imbalanced, could be recalibrated by the resolute power of truth and collective determination. The tension in the courtroom reached a fever pitch as a dramatic reckoning unfolded before the eyes of every witness. The atmosphere, once dominated by Judge Cassandra Blackwood's unassailable authority, now trembled with the shock of imminent retribution. For decades, her rulings had been executed with a cold efficiency that left little room for fairness, her disdainful laughter and dismissive gestures reinforcing a legacy of bias and unchallenged power. Yet today, the walls of the Los Angeles County Courthouse, steeped in history and secrets, bore silent witness to a turning point, a moment when even the most entrenched authority was destined to fall. In the midst of the ongoing trial, where defense attorney Jamal Robinson had painstakingly revealed the systemic corruption and deliberate manipulation that had tainted the judicial process, the unexpected arrival of federal agents shattered the carefully maintained facade. Without warning, the heavy double doors of the courtroom swung open, drawing every eye to the entrance. Two federal agents, dressed in dark suits that contrasted starkly with the somber decor of the historic courthouse, strode purposefully into the room. Their presence was imposing, each measured step reverberating across the marble floor as if heralding an unavoidable justice that had long been deferred. Judge Blackwood, who until that moment had maintained an icy composure, faltered as the agents advanced. Her eyes, usually sharp and dismissive, widened in disbelief as one of the agents stepped forward and spoke with a calm yet authoritative tone. "Judge Blackwood, you are required to accompany us immediately." The words, firm and unyielding, hung in the air, silencing even the murmurs that had begun to ripple through the courtroom. In that instance, the judge's previously unchallenged control of the room wavered, and a collective gasp filled the space as the gravity of the situation took hold. For Jamal Robinson, this was the moment he had long anticipated. Every piece of evidence, every objection he had raised, and every painstakingly compiled document now converged into a singular, resounding climax. As he watched the agents methodically approach the bench, his heart pounded with a mixture of triumph and bittersweet vindication. This was not merely a procedural disruption. It was a powerful indictment of a system that had allowed corruption and bias to flourish unchecked. The arrest of Judge Blackwood signified that no one, regardless of their position or the aura of authority they projected, was immune from accountability. The courtroom, once the stage for Judge Blackwood's unyielding arrogance, became a tableau of profound transformation. As the agent secured her with handcuffs that clicked shut with an unmistakable finality, a heavy silence descended upon the room. Every spectator, juror, and attorney was forced to confront the stark reality. The figure who had for so long ruled with impunity was now subject to the same laws she had so callously disregarded. The moment was surreal, a dramatic reversal of power that resonated deeply with all who had suffered under her biased rulings. Judge Blackwood's once imperious demeanor crumbled before the eyes of everyone present. For years, she had sat on that bench as if it were a throne, her every decision unchallenged and her influence unquestioned. But now, as she was led away by the agents, her face betrayed a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a dawning realization of the consequences of her actions. The court clerk's record of tampered evidence, the redacted emails, and the compelling statistical analyses that Jamal had presented over the past sessions all culminated in this defining moment. A moment when the scales of justice began to tip in favor of truth and accountability. In the aftermath of the arrest, the courtroom was transformed into a crucible of introspection and hope. The once oppressive aura, heavy with the legacy of Judge Blackwood's unchecked power, had been replaced by a palpable sense of catharsis. Reporters scrambled to capture every detail, their cameras flashing in rapid succession as they documented the historic reversal. Jurors, who had maintained a stoic reserve throughout the proceedings, now exchanged looks of astonishment and empathy. Even the young assistant district attorney, Philip Calloway, appeared shaken, his earlier confidence dissipating in the wake of the unfolding drama. For Darius Washington, the defendant whose fate had long been sealed by systemic injustice, the arrest represented a turning point. Seated quietly in the defendant's box, his eyes, once heavy with resigned sorrow, now glimmered with the fragile light of hope. The courtroom, with all its formidable authority, had finally become a place where his truth was being recognized. The arrest of Judge Blackwood was not only a personal victory, it was a symbolic moment that affirmed the inherent dignity of every individual, regardless of the prejudices that had once threatened to crush them. As the federal agents escorted Judge Blackwood out of the courtroom, a wave of murmurs and subdued applause rippled through the gallery. The collective emotion was complex, a mingling of relief, satisfaction, and a profound understanding that this was merely the beginning of a long overdue reckoning. Jamal Robinson, though maintaining his composure, allowed himself a brief, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. His long-standing commitment to exposing injustice had borne fruit, and in that quiet gesture lay the promise of a future where the scales of justice might finally be balanced. In the days that followed, the reverberations of Judge Blackwood's arrest permeated every corner of the community. Social media exploded with discussions about the dramatic turn of events, while local news outlets broadcast stories of long-suppressed corruption finally coming to light. Activists and legal reformers gathered in community centers and public squares, their voices united in a chorus of calls for systemic change. The courthouse, once synonymous with unchecked authority and deep-seated prejudice, had become a powerful symbol of accountability. The arrest had ignited a spark that promised to grow into a blaze of reform, inspiring countless individuals to demand transparency, fairness, and the unwavering protection of civil rights. Within the hallowed halls of the courthouse, the transformation was equally profound. A new presiding judge was swiftly appointed, an elder statesman of the law known for his impartiality and unwavering commitment to justice. His calm, deliberate demeanor provided a stark contrast to the tumultuous events that had just unfolded. With measured words, he reassured everyone present that the integrity of the judicial process would be restored. "Let this courtroom be a sanctuary for truth and a beacon of hope," he declared, his voice resonating with both authority and compassion. It was a promise that, despite the long road ahead, the journey toward a more just and equitable system had begun. For Jamal Robinson, the fall of Judge Blackwood was a moment of both triumph and reflection. He knew that the dismantling of decades of bias would not happen overnight. Rather, it was the first step in a long, arduous journey toward systemic reform. Every piece of evidence he had presented, every document painstakingly compiled, had served as a reminder that true justice demanded vigilance and unwavering commitment. He understood that while today marked the end of one chapter, it was also the beginning of a new era, one in which every voice, regardless of its past silencing, would be given the opportunity to be heard. The arrest of Judge Blackwood sent ripples far beyond the confines of the courtroom. In the broader community, the event became a rallying cry for those who had long suffered under the weight of systemic injustice. Community leaders, emboldened by this dramatic act of accountability, began organizing public forums and town hall meetings where citizens could share their own experiences and call for meaningful reforms. The narrative was clear. No institution, no matter how entrenched its power, was above the law. The triumph of accountability in this single moment was a beacon that illuminated the possibility of widespread change, a change that would eventually reshape the entire judicial system. In academic circles, the case sparked renewed interest in studies of systemic bias and judicial reform. Law schools and universities began to incorporate these events into their curricula, using them as a case study in the critical importance of transparency and accountability in the legal process. Conferences were held, and research papers were published, all underscoring the urgent need to address the deep-rooted prejudices that had long been tolerated in the name of efficiency. The narrative of Judge Blackwood's fall was no longer just a dramatic courtroom moment. It had evolved into a call for intellectual and social reform, a challenge to reimagine a system that could no longer operate in silence. For Darius Washington, the symbolic fall of the arrogant judge was a moment of profound personal liberation. Having borne the heavy burden of a biased system for so long, he now felt the first real stirrings of redemption. His journey, marked by silent suffering and unyielding resilience, was now recognized on a scale that transcended the courtroom. The collective act of holding a powerful figure accountable restored not only his personal dignity, but also the faith of an entire community that had long been marginalized. His eyes, once shadowed by despair, now shone with a cautious optimism, a belief that his struggle had paved the way for a broader victory for justice. David Johnson, whose own transformation had been catalyzed by his son's plight, continued to work tirelessly beyond the courthouse. He became an outspoken advocate for judicial reform, engaging with lawmakers and community leaders to ensure that the systemic changes sparked by Judge Blackwood's arrest would not be short-lived. His public addresses resonated deeply with a nation hungry for accountability, and his personal journey, from detachment to compassionate advocacy, served as an inspiration for all who believed in the power of redemption. In every speech, he emphasized that true justice was not an abstract ideal, but a living, breathing commitment to protecting the rights and dignity of every individual. As the echoes of Judge Blackwood's fall continued to reverberate through the halls of power and the hearts of the community, a new era of hope began to emerge. The transformation of the courtroom, once a bastion of unchecked authority, into a crucible for reform, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The arduous journey toward justice had only just begun, but the dramatic events that had unfolded signaled that the long overdue reckoning was finally underway. Every individual present, from the steadfast attorneys to the once silent jurors, now carried within them a renewed sense of purpose. The unmasking of systemic bias had laid the groundwork for an ongoing struggle, a struggle that promised not only to rectify past wrongs, but also to forge a future where the scales of justice were balanced, impartial, and humane. The legacy of Judge Blackwood's reign, marked by arrogance and cruelty, would serve as a stark reminder of the need for perpetual vigilance in the face of power. And as the new chapter in the judicial process began, the community embraced the possibility that true, lasting reform was within reach. In that historic moment, the transformation was profound and far reaching. The arrest of a judge who had long epitomized unchecked authority was not just a personal victory for those who had suffered, it was a call to action for the entire nation. The narrative of accountability and redemption now extended beyond the confines of the courtroom, influencing policy, inspiring community activism, and igniting a collective demand for a justice system that truly reflected the values of fairness and equality. As the new judge took the helm with his steady, compassionate presence promising a future where every case would be adjudicated with integrity, the message was clear. The pursuit of justice is a continuous, unyielding journey. The dramatic fall of Judge Blackwood had not erased the scars of a biased past, but it had opened the door to a future defined by transparency, accountability, and the enduring power of truth. The battle against systemic injustice was far from over, yet this pivotal moment had illuminated a path forward, a path where the voices of the oppressed would finally be heard, and where every life, regardless of background, would be valued. The turning of the tide in the courthouse was a clarion call, a powerful reminder that no institution, no matter how dominant, is infallible. The courage of Jamal Robinson, the meticulous work of Lydia Chen, and the unwavering resilience of Darius Washington had set in motion a chain of events that promised to redefine the very nature of justice. It was a moment of reckoning that resonated across every level of society, a moment when the entrenched systems of bias were exposed and challenged by the indomitable power of truth. And so, as the echoes of that historic day continued to ripple through the corridors of justice and into the hearts of the community, the legacy of these events stood as a testament to the enduring belief that even the most powerful figures can be held accountable. The fall of Judge Blackwood was not an isolated incident. It was a symbol of hope, a sign that when the collective will of the people unites with unwavering determination, even the most deeply rooted injustices can be overturned. In the end, this reckoning marked the beginning of a new era, an era in which the battle for justice, though fraught with challenges, would be fought with relentless courage, integrity, and compassion. The transformation was not immediate, but the foundation had been laid for a future where every individual would be judged not by the color of their skin or the weight of historical prejudice, but by the content of their character. The pursuit of true justice was an ongoing journey, a journey that demanded vigilance, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to the principles of fairness. And in that promise lay the hope for a brighter tomorrow, where the light of truth would dispel the shadows of corruption and every voice would be heard. In the wake of a long and arduous struggle, the halls of the Los Angeles County Courthouse now resonated with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. The dramatic fall of Judge Cassandra Blackwood had not only shattered the dark legacy of biased rulings, but had also ignited a transformative movement, a reawakening of the principles of fairness and accountability that had long been neglected. As the sun rose over the city, its rays filtering through the historic stained glass windows, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted from one of oppressive despair to one charged with the promise of redemption. Darius Washington, whose life had been marred by decades of systemic injustice, emerged from the ordeal with quiet dignity and a newfound determination. His exoneration was more than a personal triumph. It symbolized the breaking of long-held chains and the reclamation of a voice that had once been silenced by prejudice. In the moments following the judge's final decree, Darius's eyes shone with the soft light of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. His journey, marked by silent endurance and inner strength, now promised a future where every individual's rights would be upheld, regardless of their background. Meanwhile, defense attorney Jamal Robinson, whose steadfast dedication had been the driving force behind the exposure of deep-seated corruption, stood as a beacon of integrity. His efforts to dismantle the veneer of bias had reverberated far beyond the confines of the courtroom. Jamal's meticulously gathered evidence and impassioned advocacy had not only challenged the status quo, but had also set a precedent for accountability. Now, as he addressed the assembled community in a solemn yet uplifting speech, his voice carried a message that transcended legal victory. It was a call for collective transformation. Today, he declared, we witness the birth of a new era in justice. Let our struggle be the foundation upon which we build a future defined by equality, transparency, and unwavering respect for every human life. His words, resonating with both conviction and humility, stirred the hearts of everyone present. Outside the courthouse, the city of Los Angeles pulsed with a vibrant energy that mirrored the transformative events inside. Community leaders, activists, and everyday citizens gathered in public squares and community centers, their voices united in the pursuit of reform. Grassroots organizations quickly mobilize, launching initiatives designed to educate and empower those who had long felt marginalized by an unjust system. Mentorship programs were established to guide at-risk youth, and local art workshops blossomed as creative spaces where individuals could express their experiences and dreams. Murals painted on once-forgotten walls depicted symbolic images of unity and renewal, capturing the spirit of a community determined to reclaim its dignity and voice. At the heart of this burgeoning movement was a shared belief that true justice extends beyond the courtroom. It is a way of life. Lawmakers, inspired by the resounding public outcry, began drafting new legislation aimed at ensuring that digital evidence was handled with utmost transparency and that independent oversight would become a cornerstone of the judicial process. In academic institutions across the nation, discussions on systemic bias and judicial reform flourished. Law schools introduced courses on ethical evidence management, and interdisciplinary conferences brought together legal experts, technologists, and community advocates to devise innovative solutions for preventing future injustices. The intellectual momentum not only deepened the collective understanding of the issues at hand, but also fueled a broader commitment to institutional change. David Johnson, the once detached U.S. Attorney General who had undergone a profound personal transformation, continued to lead by example. His journey, from prioritizing career over family to embracing a mission of reform, had become a powerful narrative that resonated deeply with a generation longing for accountability. David tirelessly engaged with legislators, community groups, and media outlets, sharing his insights and advocating for policies that would safeguard against the abuses of power. His public addresses, marked by an authentic blend of remorse and determination, challenged every individual to reconsider what it meant to pursue justice in a society where every voice must be heard. As the new presiding judge, an elder statesman renowned for his impartiality and deep understanding of the law, took his seat, he pledged to restore the integrity of the courtroom. Let this sanctuary of justice now serve as a symbol of our collective commitment to fairness, he proclaimed, his steady voice a promise that the dark days of unchecked authority were drawing to a close. His declaration was not just a formal statement, it was an invitation to every member of the community to join in the effort to rebuild a system that had long been marred by discrimination and corruption. In neighborhoods once defined by silence and despair, the ripple effects of these reforms began to manifest in tangible ways. Community centers hosted workshops on legal literacy and civic engagement, empowering citizens with the knowledge and tools to advocate for their rights. Artists and activists collaborated to produce public art that celebrated diversity and resilience, each mural and sculpture a tribute to the spirit of a people determined to rise above adversity. These grassroots endeavors, fueled by a collective desire for change, underscored the profound truth that every act of renewal, no matter how small, could contribute to the greater transformation of society. The transformation within the courthouse served as a microcosm for the wider societal shift taking place across the nation. The fall of Judge Blackwood was a stark reminder that no one, regardless of the power they wield, is above the law. It was a call to arms for those who had long been silenced by injustice, a signal that the relentless pursuit of truth and accountability could and would prevail. The narrative of this trial, with its twists of redemption and moments of profound moral clarity, had now become a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring power of courage, resilience, and the unyielding belief in a fair and just future. As the echoes of this historic day reverberated through the corridors of power and into the hearts of the community, a new dawn of justice emerged. It was a dawn characterized by redemption and transformation, a dawn where the scars of the past would serve as reminders of the battles fought and the victories won in the name of true equality. The journey toward complete reform was ongoing, a continuous effort to ensure that every ruling, every case, was a reflection of a system that valued humanity above all else. In this renewed era, the legacy of Darius Washington, Jamal Robinson, and David Johnson was destined to inspire future generations. Their struggles and triumphs had not only redefined what it meant to seek justice, but had also laid the groundwork for a society where every individual, irrespective of their background, could stand with dignity and hope. The transformation was deep, reaching into every facet of the legal and social fabric, and promising that the battle against injustice would be fought with the collective strength of a united people. This new dawn of justice, born from the crucible of a courtroom battle and nurtured by the resilience of a community, was a powerful reminder that change is always possible. It was a call to action for every person who believes in fairness, a challenge to continue the struggle until the scales of justice are balanced for all. In that promise lay the hope for a brighter future, a future where the light of truth dispels the shadows of corruption and where every voice is heard and valued. In reflecting upon the journey of Darius Washington, a man whose life had been shadowed by systemic injustice but ultimately redeemed through relentless courage, we witness a saga of transformation that transcends the confines of a single courtroom battle. Darius, once silenced by bias and burdened with unjust convictions, emerged as a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit. His story, interwoven with the unwavering dedication of defense attorney Jamal Robinson and the profound transformation of U.S. Attorney General David Johnson, forms a powerful narrative that challenges entrenched prejudice and redefines what it means to fight for justice. The journey began in the imposing halls of the Los Angeles County Courthouse, where Judge Cassandra Blackwood ruled with an air of absolute authority. For over 2 decades, her courtroom had been a stage for a system steeped in bias, a system that routinely silenced attorneys, dismissed critical evidence, and handed down harsh sentences to black defendants without regard for fairness. The oppressive atmosphere in that historic building was palpable. Every cold marble column and every heavy oak door bore silent witness to the years of unchallenged injustice. In that space, Darius Washington sat with quiet dignity, his eyes reflecting both the pain of wrongful conviction and an inner strength that defied the odds. Defense attorney Jamal Robinson, known for his unyielding resolve and meticulous strategy, took up the mantle to challenge this injustice. His tireless efforts to expose the systemic flaws within the judicial process were not just about defending Darius, they were part of a broader crusade against a rigged system that had long suppressed the voices of the marginalized. Jamal's presentation of meticulously gathered evidence, redacted emails, tampered digital files, and statistical data revealing a disturbing pattern of biased rulings became a rallying cry. His voice, steady and resolute, pierced the oppressive silence of the courtroom and sowed the seeds of doubt regarding the integrity of Judge Blackwood's authority. With each piece of evidence laid bare, the collective realization grew that the injustice Darius had suffered was not an isolated event, but the manifestation of a deeply flawed system that had systematically devalued Black lives. As the trial unfolded, the hidden truth of systemic bias was gradually uncovered. Expert testimony from digital forensic specialist Lydia Chen revealed that surveillance footage, once considered an objective record, had been deliberately altered to favor the prosecution. Her detailed analysis of manipulated metadata and subtle anomalies in the recordings exposed a network of corruption that extended far beyond a single case. Simultaneously, former court clerks provided raw, unvarnished accounts of how critical evidence was intentionally suppressed or expunged, corroborating the argument that Judge Blackwood's courtroom had long operated under a veil of prejudice and indifference. These revelations, together with the persuasive statistical comparisons and personal narratives of those wronged by the system, converged to form an irrefutable case that systemic injustice was not only real, but endemic. The turning point came when the unyielding facade of unchecked authority finally began to crumble. With the mounting evidence of deliberate manipulation and the unwavering determination of those who dared to speak the truth, the scales of justice started to tip. The dramatic arrest of Judge Blackwood by federal agents inside her own courtroom became a symbolic moment, a powerful reckoning that validated the years of struggle against corruption. Her fall from power was not merely an isolated incident, it was the catalyst for a sweeping transformation. In that moment of accountability, the courtroom, once a symbol of oppressive control, was reborn as a sanctuary for truth, signaling the beginning of a new era in the pursuit of justice. In the aftermath of Judge Blackwood's arrest, the collective spirit of the community and the legal fraternity ignited a new dawn of reform. The narrative shifted from one of despair to one of redemption and hope. Darius Washington's exoneration served as a poignant reminder that even the most deeply wounded souls can rise again when given the chance to reclaim their dignity. Defense attorney Jamal Robinson, whose relentless advocacy had laid bare the systemic biases, emerged as a symbol of integrity and resilience, inspiring countless others to join the fight for fair and impartial justice. Meanwhile, David Johnson, transformed by his own journey of redemption and the agonizing realization of the cost of his past detachment, dedicated himself to spearheading reforms that would ensure such injustices could never occur again. The impact of these events rippled far beyond the courthouse walls. Across Los Angeles and throughout the nation, grassroots organizations, community leaders, and ordinary citizens united to demand transparency and accountability. Public forums, town hall meetings, and peaceful protests became the instruments of change. where voices that had been silenced for too long rose in unison to call for a justice system that values every human life. Artistic expressions, from powerful murals to community theater, captured the essence of this transformation, symbolizing the unyielding hope that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, the human spirit can prevail. The lessons derived from this tumultuous journey are both profound and universally applicable. First, the story teaches us that resilience in the face of systemic injustice is possible. Darius Washington's steadfast dignity, despite years of wrongful conviction, reminds us that our inner strength and hope can serve as powerful catalysts for change. Second, it underscores the importance of standing up for what is right, even when the odds are stacked against us. Jamal Robinson's relentless pursuit of truth, in spite of overwhelming institutional bias, serves as a clarion call that courage and integrity can dismantle even the most entrenched systems of oppression. Third, the transformation of David Johnson from a detached bureaucrat to a compassionate reformer illustrates that redemption is not only possible but essential for personal and societal healing. His journey compels us to reflect on our own lives and consider the importance of empathy, accountability, and the courage to change. These lessons are not confined to the legal realm. They resonate deeply in every facet of our lives. In our personal relationships, our communities, and our workplaces, we are often confronted with systems that may seem inflexible or biased. However, by embracing resilience, courage, and a steadfast commitment to truth, we can challenge these structures and work towards creating a more just and compassionate world. Whether it is by speaking up against unfair practices, supporting those who are marginalized, or simply nurturing our own inner strength, every act of integrity contributes to a larger movement of transformation and hope. As we close this chapter on a remarkable journey of redemption and reform, we invite you, our valued viewer, to join us in this ongoing fight for justice. Your support is vital in amplifying these stories and inspiring further action against systemic injustice. If you found this narrative as stirring and enlightening as we did, please consider subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you not only help us bring more compelling stories to light, but you also become part of a community that believes in the power of truth, resilience, and transformative change. Together, we can continue to challenge the status quo and work towards a future where justice is not just an ideal, but a living, breathing reality for everyone. Thank you for your support, and let's move forward together, one step at a time, on this journey towards a brighter, more equitable tomorrow.